Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here. Today we're going to be looking at a novel, Goth Opera by Paul Cornell. I really enjoyed this Fifth Doctor story. Now this works basically as a sequel to Blood Harvest by Terrence Dicks, which in itself is basically a sequel to State of Decay. Now I've already reviewed Blood Harvest. You can check out that review here. I had some problems with it. It wasn't terrible. It was very kind of middle of the road. It did some things I liked. It did some things I didn't. And this is a Seventh Doctor story, and I swear that looks like Christopher Lee to me. It just does. But this works as a sequel toward it, even though it's with the Fifth Doctor. Now, this takes place between Snake Dance and Maldron Undead, which it states in the story. It also states on the back, I believe, or somewhere in there, that it works as a sequel to Blood Harvest, so if you don't know. I really enjoyed this one. Basically, it involves a group of vampires on Earth due to the events from Blood Harvest. Plus, I like Paul Cornell. He's a good writer. Now, Nyssa, of course, becomes a vampire in this. I don't really think that's a spoiler because it's right here on the cover. So it doesn't feel like a spoiler to me. So the Doctor, of course, is having to deal with Nyssa, who is slowly becoming a vampire, and she's having to deal with that. It shows part of the story from her point of view. The story does jump points of view. Like sometimes you're with Nyssa's point of view, sometimes the Doctor, sometimes Tegan, and sometimes other characters. You know, it's a third-person point of view, but it jumps between them. Like there's two of the vampires I really like, a couple. I think it's like Jake and Madeline. I like them in this. They have really good personalities. They're really fleshed out characters. And then Lord, I can't pronounce that guy's name. Yagath. One of the characters who's also from Blood Harvest is back. And then you have a female Time Lord. I think her name is like Wraith. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that. Roth. Who is apparently an old friend of the Doctor's. Like back when he ran away from Gallifrey, there was actually a point where she was supposed to go with him. So they're old chums, but now they're kind of enemies. It's really neat. The story takes place on Earth. It's really hard to go into it without spoilers. And it's basically a plan to bring the vampires back. The kind of lead Lord vampire wants to build an army of vampires. And then the other female Time Lord, Wraith, is kind of his new consort. And together, they're working together to try to turn Earth into a world of vampires. So they'll have an army to invade Gallifrey. I think it's written really well. The Fifth Doctor feels like the Fifth Doctor. I like the fact they acknowledge that Wraith specifically targets the Fifth Doctor because she thinks he's the most vulnerable one. I find that interesting because she actually gets to the time scoop from the Five Doctors and she scrolls through all the way to the latest of his incarnations, which you assume is the seventh one. And she's like, definitely don't want to mess with that one. And so she picks the Fifth Doctor as the one she wants to target because he strikes her as the most vulnerable. I like that. I don't know why, but I like that. I kind of agree with that, actually, from the first 7 Doctors. If she scrolled a little further ahead and got to 13, she should have went after that one. Some 13 shade. But it's written really well. You have some guest characters that are really well, like a guy named Lang. I don't really like his character, though, and some of the stuff they do with him I don't really care for, I'll be honest. And then some of the stuff that happens, like really faithful people exploding, is kind of weird. But it's either that or they turn into vampires. It's a little odd. Much like some of the other novels from this time, this has a more adult feel to it than the TV show. Like it's patterned more after season 21 and season 22, which are darker. But you still have, it's like Doctor Who grew up. And I don't necessarily mean that Doctor Who needed to grow up. But it's basically like you had people who watched Doctor Who as kids who are now adults and writing for the show. And so they brought that adulthood they're in now with them. And, it's very graphic in places. Like you have a vampire that's, holding its head, its human mother's head, because it killed its parents. Stuff like that. It gets a bit graphic at times, which isn't necessary in my opinion. I have a lot of problems with some of the books from this era. This is still a really good read, though. It works as a nice, not only sequel to Blood Harvest, and I find it much more enjoyable than Blood Harvest. Still not as good as State of Decay, even the novelization of State of Decay. but I did like it. I found it enjoyable. I think Paul's a good writer. And then how they get Nyssa back to being human, I think is done really well. There's even a part where there's like a 1-year-old baby running around as a vampire. That's okay, interesting. But somehow the vampire lore works in this story, works for me. The way the Doctor manages to save the day because he uses his brain. He outsmarts them right at the end. I love that. I love the fact that he looks at what's going on around him and he uses his brain. Twice in a row, really, right there at the end. 2 times in a row, he outsmarts everyone else. I love that. I love that the Doctor doesn't solve it by physical force. He solves it by using this. I love that. I also like the fact that Race survives, or Roth, or whatever her name is. I like that she possibly survives. She kind of ends up like Salamander, which means I think she survived. I got the impression she survived, especially being a Time Lord. So she's an interesting character. I wouldn't mind seeing. I don't know if she's in the expanded lore a lot more, but I like her as a character. I would like to see more of her. They could bring her into the show. I'd be all right with that. And then the castle. There's a castle at one point. You're like, where the heck does the castle come from? And then the revelation of what's going on with the castle, I did not see coming, and I should have seen it coming. And I love when Doctor Who does that. When it's one of those things, I'm like, I should have seen that. I so should have picked up on that. How could I not have picked up on that? When the show or the expanded media managed to do that to me, much like Planet 55, Orphan 55, which is not a great story, but the reveal that they're on Earth, I should have seen that coming. It's so beneath the Planet of the Apes. And I didn't. So I always give that episode some props for that. I always have to give it, as bad as it is, and it is, I always have to give it some props that it was able to fool me until that reveal. And I was like, I should have seen it. It's kind of like that here, even though this story is much better. There's a reveal there with her castle, with the castle. And I was like, I should have seen that. There's a couple things it does where I should have seen that. But I enjoyed it. There's also a part where Tegan becomes very not sure of the Doctor, let us say. Like, she doesn't know if she can trust him. And I like that little bit as well. The story writes all of the main cast well. The Doctor, Tegan, Nyssa. I think Paul has a really good grasp of these characters and who they are. Because all 3 of them feel like they're characters from the show. So they're written very well. So I very much enjoyed Goth Opera. It's really good. If you like vampires, if you like State of Decay, I'd give it a recommend. Although I would say you probably want to read Blood Harvest first, which is, of course, by Uncle Terrence, if you like Uncle Terrence. Now, I wasn't just blown away by this one, but it's all right. It's, kind of middle of the road. It's worth a read once. And then that kind of gives you the stuff you need to go into this one, which is considerably better, in my opinion, without quite hitting State of Decay levels, which was also by Uncle Terrence. So yeah, Goth Opera. I liked it. Have you read this story? I want to know what you think of it. I also want to give a shout out to the Flyattractor who sent me both of these novels and the novelization of State of Decay. And he even had them labeled with little sticky notes as the order you're supposed to read them in, which I really liked. I really appreciate the Flyattractor sending these. He's been responsible for a lot of the Doctor Who novels I've gotten, so huge shout out to him. I really appreciate all of the fan mail he's sent over the years. If there's anything you would like to send me, I do have my P.O. box down in the description below. A link to my Amazon wish list is down there. A link to my Amazon UK wish list is down there. I update those fairly regularly. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me that way. The Flyattractor is also one of my patrons, which I appreciate. Been with me a long time there. The link to the Patreon is down in the description below. That helps me out. A lot of you know I'm saving up for a house. That is coming along. And basically most of the Patreon money, unless something comes up, because Lord knows stuff comes up, most of the Patreon money does go back toward the house account. If you want to help me out with that, and it gets you access to early access to stuff, exclusive videos on Sunday, depending on your tier level, and vote. You get to vote in polls and stuff like that. Also, you can, if you like, there are options for free memberships, just if you kind of want to see some of the stuff I do there, even if you just want to check out the page. And that gives me a chance to try to talk you into moving up a tier maybe to one of the paid tiers. So check that out. I do want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons: Colin Coney, Sam Venning, Unknown289, Finn Perkins, and Paul Gibbons. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. Very much appreciated. And most importantly, thank you for watching.